Welcome to Lost Girl Therapy. Let's talk about anxious attachment. So, as somebody who has disorganized attachment, I understand very acutely what it feels like when the anxious side of something gets triggered. And I noticed fairly recently that I was going through an anxious attachment flare, and I wanted to describe to you guys what it feels like because sometimes it can be so under the surface that we actually don't even realize that it's happening until we are in it. So I had an experience where I was feeling really, really connected to someone, and I left that experience and I was like, this is great. You feel safe, you feel grounded, you feel secure. And over the course of like a day, I just started noticing how my mind was switching into that anxious mode. It said, okay, you know what? I actually don't feel so secure because now I am replaying the entirety of that scenario over again and again with a fine-tooth comb, trying to read the other person's signals. And what's important about this is that I was trying to read their nonverbal cues. So the way that they looked at a certain thing, the way their body language was, I was basically trying to read every single thing except for what was being said. Over time, my mind became much more anxious to a degree that I was then assigning meaning and assigning narratives to what I suspected was going on. So I was taking those nonverbal cues and I was then assigning a narrative to it. And I know for me that my anxious attachment has been triggered the moment I say, well, if you just texted them, that's my cue. My signal literally says, well, if you just texted them, AKA, if I texted them and I said, blanket, insert text message here that basically highlights my anxiety and I'm asking you to resolve it, that already tells me that my anxious attachment side has been triggered. Because what I'm trying to do is take the unprocessed feelings and then hand them off to someone. And remember, my initial judgment or takeaway from the situation was that I was safe, I was secure, I was grounded. And then within 24 hours, all of a sudden my mind was saying, there's more to the story, you're gonna miss the signal, the other shoe is gonna drop. And eventually I ended up working myself up into such a state of anxiety that the ruminations became a degree of, well, you could just text them, you could just text them, you could just text them, it's okay, you could just text them. And when you get to that really heightened state, that is where for me, it's very important to recognize that texting them is not going to resolve the anxiety. And it can be very challenging to kind of pull yourself back into the space of what are the facts of the situation? What did I experience at first? And what am I experiencing now that is different? I like to bring myself into the awareness of the dichotomy by bringing myself back to the initial event, reminding myself what it felt like, noticing that I now feel something wildly different, and then asking what happened in between those two time frames. For me, I pay attention to the fact that there is distance, there is no communication, there's nothing been added to the situation that would either alleviate or accelerate the anxiety, and it really is me against myself. So if I'm working in a space of me against myself, going out and texting someone is not going to alleviate that anxiety. It will alleviate that initial impulsivity urge that I have, but it's not going to reduce it entirely. So this is where distraction or anxiety reduction techniques become really important. For me, I like to take a walk, I like to watch a movie, I like to do embroidery, I like to basically throw myself into anything that will distract my mind from spinning into the cycles. It's not always easy, it does take some time, but now that I am 48 to 72 hours out of this situation, what I begin to notice is my mind jumps to that much less than it did in the initial 24 hours. So if you're somebody who has anxious attachment or disorganized and you notice that you're trending towards an anxious flare, figure out ways for you to invite in anxiety reduction techniques, especially in the first 24 hours after feeling connected to someone, because that is when you're going to feel the most heightened.